Just a couple more minutes until we'll start. Dr. Balico's in outer space. I love it.
Yeah, I've just got to get out of here a little bit.
I think I had a meeting late last night and I took my tropical scene off. You know, I was talking with a bunch of colleagues, genetics researchers. And I was like, okay, let's just, I don't want them thinking I'm doing something I'm not. Let's just get into this.
They probably wouldn't think that. I had a disaster calendar background, and so I decided that probably wasn't a good name for psych.
A what? Disaster calendar?
You know, March, whatever, we have fires in Australia, locusts, Africa, asteroids, all the different plagues that are befalling us.
I see. You'll have to show that to me sometime. I've not seen that.
Okay.
So I don't see any students today. I know it's.
Yeah,
I know they're here, but I don't see any of their faces, and so I know. I know it's Friday.
One. Look at them. There they are.
To see
they're here.
People today. You know,
Nana Grace, she's here.
You're my connection with the outside world. I'm so serious. You know, I've been isolated for quite a while. Hello, everybody. It's so good to see your faces. So we're at Friday. We've made it a whole week. And I know there's been some ups and downs, and I thank you all for keeping in touch with us and letting us know what's going on. We appreciate it. So shall we go ahead and get started so we don't get behind? All right. And so you know to put the questions in the chat. It's always a good thing. Okay. So I didn't get through all the content last time, and it was just 3 slides, or 2 slides actually, that we didn't have done. So I thought I'd look at them. So our last get together or class was about therapeutic communication, and there's just 2 more points here to bring up. If I can get this, there we go. So, and I need to move, I gotta move some stuff around here a little bit so I can read. So the concept here is that interviewing in a therapeutic manner with patients is something that you develop over time. It's not just a natural way, it's a focused way of communicating. And so they suggest that you have supervision as you're beginning to do this. And then as you start to develop your skills and become more solid and comfortable in them, you're good to go. You're on your own. So it's just that, know that this will take some time. As I shared with you last time, it's really a good idea to do a lot more listening than talking, and just let the patients reveal their story to you. And also, when we work together with colleagues that have more knowledge than us, no matter what we're doing, if you work with somebody with more experience, more knowledge, you can learn from them. They'll learn from you too, but you know, it's often mutually helpful, beneficial. But this information just tells you that you will develop your skill set over time so that you're more therapeutically engaging the people that you work with than non-therapeutically engaging. And remember that just because it says non-therapeutic, that does not mean that it's bad. It's just more social conversation as opposed to helping the patient to work through issues and goals that they may have. There is a thing called a process recording. We used to, in psych mental health nursing, have these as assignments for students to monitor how they were communicating and to work on developing that skill set of therapeutic communication. And instead of me just reading these bullet points, let's just take a look at one. This is one I just downloaded off of the internet. It was it came from a textbook. It's a sample, as it says here, and it provides you with what the student said, and they're telling you what they verbally said and also what their nonverbal stance was. So his nonverbal was that he was standing next to the patient at a particular angle, and he was introducing himself and sharing some information with him. And he gave an example, he or she gave an example of the type of technique that they were using. So in this one, they said giving information, and in the top bulleted one, so they described the information that they were giving, or it's often, you know, and then, I'm sorry, it's described here in the second column, and then it's verbatim in the third column. And then in the bottom of the second column, they tell you that they were asking an exploring question. And just to kind of share this with you a little bit more, the nonverbal and verbal communication part was they're asking, I'm not doing that great, I don't feel like I belong here. So that's the patient sharing that information. They describe how the patient responds non-verbally, and then the student has an opportunity in that very last column to reflect on what happened in that snapshot. So I hope that's not as clear as mud, but it's a model to help you develop skills. So here's the reason I'm sharing this with you. If you're a person who has difficulty communicating with patients, it's not a natural thing for everybody, but maybe maybe half of you are really, really good at it. And maybe 20% of you maybe have more difficulty doing it. This is an exercise. You just have to remember one brief conversation, kind of break it down like this, and take a look at how you interacted with that patient and reflect on that. Could I have done this better? Did I do it well? What are some things that I might think about when I'm approaching a patient the next time? It's a way of documenting rehearsal or practice, if you will. So anyway, that's a process recording. It's a sample of it. It is a very typical exercise or activity in psych mental health clinicals. You're not doing that this time, but you do have, now you have information about it. Okay, now we're going on to today's content. So I'm starting out with the legal ethical, and then we'll do the treatment setting. I know it's kind of flipped, but it doesn't really matter, just so you get the information, I think. So we'll look at ethics and bioethics, principles of those things, look at legal processes that have to do with nurses and the care specifically of patients with mental illnesses. We'll look at the patient's rights. We'll look at legal concerns with regard to restraint and seclusion. We'll address confidentiality, HIPAA, personal health information, that kind of stuff. And we'll look at some specific things with regard to the law, like torts, negligence, malpractice, those kinds of things. And then what nurses can do to protect themselves and to make sure that they're providing accurate information in terms of documentation. So this is just definitional concepts here. So ethics, right or wrongs in society and their subjective norms based on that societal group. Bioethics is generally referred to health ethical dilemmas. So the things that are happening in your health practice. An issue like that might be seclusion and restraint, right? How we look at seclusion and restraint of patients, in particular restraint. So when you're literally tying someone down, strapping them down to a bed or something of that nature. And then an ethical dilemma is the conflict between two or more courses of action. So you find yourself at cross purposes. What do I do here? What is the best action for the patient and all of the other people involved? Remember, as the nurse, you're responsible for all of the people in the environment, in the care environment, right? As if you're the nurse on a given unit, you have the responsibility of all of the patients that are there that you're providing care for. Then we look at the principles of bioethics, and these are terms that have been around for a very long time. So beneficence, and you may have had this stuff before, so I apologize if this is redundant. You've been here and done this. But beneficence is the duty to promote good. And so when we're thinking about psych patients, our goal is to promote their health, or any patient, right? Then autonomy is respecting their rights and allowing them to make decisions, even when you feel that they lack the capacity based on their health status. We want to give them as much autonomy, be as least restrictive as possible in exerting measures of control and that kind of thing. Justice is to distribute resources or to provide care in an equal manner for all patients, regardless of anything, right? So equal care. Fidelity or non-malfeasance, this is maintaining loyalty and commitment. In other words, doing no wrong to your patient. Making sure that you take all actions and are aware and work towards prevention and really good quality health management. And then veracity is one's duty to always communicate truthfully. That's verbally and non-verbally. So even, and absolutely in your writings, right? Okay, so with regard to mental health laws, they vary from state to state. One thing that I would encourage you to look at as a new person, you'll be going out into practice just after at the end of May or somewhere in May, you'll be graduating and going out into the practice world. Before you go there, you really do need to be looking at patient bill of rights and becoming very knowledgeable about what those are, because you're responsible to know them in your care environments, right? And you want to make sure that you're on top of this. You don't want to be a nurse that's out practicing and you're not living up to or providing care that's appropriate for patients because you lack this knowledge. So it's really important that you do that. If you choose to work in psych mental health in the state of South Carolina, there is an entire number of statutes, and don't feel that you need to study that for this class, okay? You don't have time to study all that. That's if you're going to go into law or you're going to go specifically into like mental health law or something like that. But there are some really good basic things. If you go just Google South Carolina mental health statutes, Section 44 covers all of them for the state of South Carolina, and there's numerous different statutes that they have there. The Patient Bill of Rights is one of them. So if you want to take a look at Patient Bill of Rights, you can find it there. Laws for patients with mental illnesses or mental health concerns are looking at treatment instead of punishment and incarceration. So are we providing fair treatment that is least restrictive for that individual and their specific healthcare needs? Okay. Get a drink here. Okay, so when we look at admission procedures, we've got various types of admissions for these patients. They can be coming in, as it says here, an informal admission that the patient has sought out for themselves. They've made a decision, I'm not feeling right, things are not going right. And remember, when a patient is going to be admitted, it has to be a pretty serious thing. Patients just don't get admitted because they need to go to hotel, hospital, and take a vacation, right? It's there's something pretty serious going on with them. So maybe they're having thoughts about harming themselves, and they recognize that, they have insight about that, and they seek out their provider and ask to be placed in an inpatient hospital environment. So that's people coming in voluntarily. Also, you may have a patient that's underage, and then their parent would be involved in that decision making and reach out to healthcare healthcare organization that manages mental health in adolescents, and then they would seek out a voluntary admission. We also have involuntary commitment. That means that the patient has not given consent for this. They don't want to necessarily be there. They may recognize, they may have some insights, but they may not be fully able to help manage or manage themselves. So we have this involuntary commitment process where family, healthcare providers, concerned people that are have access to the patient make a case for this patient needing to be in the hospital. Law enforcement absolutely could be involved in this, and often that is the case. Someone has called the police because the individual is acting out. Remember last week I shared with you about the patient that I had. She did not have it. She lacked total insight and went into somebody's home and took all of their belongings out of their home and sold them in a yard sale out in their front yard. So that definitely, that was a situation where law enforcement would be involved. So we see this in people with pretty severe mental illnesses. This notion of danger to self or others, that is a key thing. That is a key and essential principle for you to have knowledge about. So when a person is a danger to themselves or other people, that typically is the legal attribute that would get them inpatient. Okay. If they can't meet their basic needs, that's that's another issue. And then I've already talked about this lack of insight, lack of judgment, not even having awareness that they need to go in and receive treatment because they're so ill. And they're so, experiencing so many delusional types of things. Okay, so here's information to take you a little bit further into the involuntary commitment. So we have to remember that patients do have a right to due process, no matter how mentally ill they are. And so this writ of habeas corpus, maybe you know about this, maybe not, but just to share a little bit more with you about it. There are times when habeas corpus is suspended. You would see that happen in like military situations, right? We would detain prisoners, if you will, or the opposition because, they were doing something really bad. War times is a common reason why habeas corpus is suspended. What it means is a person is detained without the benefit of having been heard in a court. And so that means like a patient is admitted to the hospital, but they've not yet been judged or determined by a judge. It could even be a judge that has medical authority. We call them, in the state that I came from, we call them judicial hospital referees. At any rate, they make the decision about whether the patient's going to be legally committed to an institution for treatment. So writ of habeas corpus being detained without a hearing, but they do have a right to due process, and so we need to get them into a hearing as soon as we can. We also, this other legal terminology, least restrictive doctrine, that applies to all aspects of healthcare practice, particularly in psych mental health nursing. We want to do everything that is least restrictive to the extent that we can help them be healthy and safe, and all persons around them are healthy and safe. And I'll explain that a little bit more to you as we go along. An emergency commitment, this is happens very often when there is a need because of some acute thing that is going on. We see this happen in people that are confused or experience dementia, and it's kind of like been building up over a period of time. They really put themselves at risk, and family request this emergency admission if they have family. Or maybe it's a neighbor or something like that that points it out, that they're out wandering around without clothes on or improperly clothed, or something of that nature that you notice that something's going on with them. They haven't picked up their mail for weeks, and people are starting to notice in the community. So this emergency thing is used for observation. So we get like 24 to 96 hours in according to your textbook. In some states, it's just 3 days, so 72 hours. So again, that would be determined by your state's laws. But it gives care providers in that psychiatric environment an opportunity to monitor the patient's behavior, to take very good notes, to try to come up with a diagnosis based on criteria in the DSM, and to provide treatment, the initial treatment. And yes, treatment could actually be provided before they were even in a court to determine what their level of care needs are. So anyway, just we'll stop there on that point of it. And then there's also assistant outpatient treatment, so court-ordered outpatient. So that means that person doesn't need that high level of inpatient care, but that they'll benefit from outpatient level of care as long as they are willing to go along with that. Sometimes when we find folks that have to be court-ordered for outpatient, you really got to monitor them because they sometimes will not participate in it. Or court-ordered outpatient could be after they were actually inpatient and now they're doing like a step down, if you will. And so they're able to be in an outpatient environment. So again, that's helping us to meet that least restrictive doctrine. With regard to discharging, and so you have conditional release. So this is an opportunity to receive treatment at a lower level of care like that outpatient. Unconditional release, this is court ordered or administratively ordered. So unconditional release, so they don't have to go on for any additional care. That's pretty rare. You have a patient that's in the hospital, we don't do any follow-up. That would be a really rare thing. It would happen when the judge decided that the patient did not demonstrate any of the things that the patient was put in the hospital for. So, and they were able, maybe they got really drunk and were doing some really outlandish things, but after 72 hours, they're no longer intoxicated. It was maybe a one-time bender. They're not, haven't had any DUIs and other things like that. So they might be released then. Then release against medical advice, and this is something, this section is really key. I want you to tune in on this. I want you to keep in mind that it's within your scope of practice to ask the patient the reason why they want to leave against medical advice. And I would do this in any treatment setting, not just psychiatric mental health. You have a patient that says, I'm leaving, I'm not going to do X, I want to get out of here. You should ask them why. And you need to document that very clearly. You need to offer them alternatives as well, okay? But the main thing is it's within our practice and actually appropriate practice for you to inquire of the patient, why did you want to leave against medical advice? Would you please share that with me? Would you be willing to share some information about what's going on and what your plan is? So that's just an important component. Then insight and judgment, as we've talked about before, this means they have the capacity and the ability to reason, make considered decisions, their conclusions seem reasonable, and they're able to discern or to determine what is real, what is not real, etc. Right? So they have those abilities. Okay. So looking at, and I didn't put all of these down, but you can access this information in more detail in your text. The right to treatment, I think that makes sense for itself in terms of you have a right to receive care if you need that help. We know that not everybody has insurance, and so that's concerning. So the type of treatment, I think, might be the issue there, right? Well, they might have access to emergency room support for the time, and hopefully referrals would be made further if it was determined that that person needed it. But if they lack insurance and financial ability, that may be the end of their treatment. And that is really a sad thing when you have somebody that has a significant mental illness or chronic mental illness. Or even an acute event that happens. Okay, then the right to refuse treatment. I've got a few bulleted points there, things that I think are important for you to be aware of. So in the involuntarily admitted patient, the client still retains their right to informed consent, their right to freedom from unreasonable bodily restraints. That's always the big thing. Right to informed consent. right to refuse medications. Even the patient that is psychotic that could benefit from a neuroleptic or an antipsychotic medication, they have a right to refuse that medicine. And all of their other rights are preserved. So just because somebody comes in involuntarily doesn't mean that they have to have the treatment. As a matter of fact, and this would be state-based, you can have a patient in a treatment environment for weeks, months, and even years, I hate to say that, but it has happened, that are quite psychotically ill, have a major mental illness, and they receive no medication because they have determined that they do not want to take it and they don't need it. And they are hallucinating and really have poor judgment and are demonstrating some pretty significant symptoms. That varies from state to state. There are states that will say you can medicate that patient against their wishes, but you also have to be really careful about that because that is a form of battery to patients when we're injecting them with drugs. So we need to be, you have to be very careful about what you do, make sure that you're following the letter of the law and document everything and educate, okay? We talked about the right to informed consent. That means that the patient understands risk, benefits, and alternatives of healthcare services. And that the person, again, must voluntarily accept treatment, and the provider must obtain consent. And that's typically the medical doctor and the nurse practitioner, the ones that would be prescribing specific therapies in an inpatient environment, outpatient environment, etc. We'll go into more on rights regarding restraint and seclusion, so I'll hold off on that. And then right to confidentiality. There are exceptions to that rule, and the exception that's primary is when that person is threatening the life of another person, tells you that they are going to kill their husband or kill their wife or something like that, or kill their therapist or whatever it might be. You as the nurse report that to the primary care provider. You document that carefully in the record, and the primary provider informs the person that could potentially be killed to make sure that they can take measures to provide for their own safety. Okay, so a little bit at looking at treatment. So we talked about the right to refuse, there's emergency situations and so on and so forth. I did share with you already about a patient that could be medicated if they have a serious mental illness, if they continue to suffer as a result of their illness, if we determine that the benefits of the treatment outweigh the harm, the person's demonstrating a lack of capacity, etc. Least restrictive services and treatment, non-pharmacological treatment. All these things have been tried. If we have a court order that says we can medicate that patient, then we can. If we don't, they go unmedicated, but we still provide them therapeutic services. Okay, so informed consent, I think I've already probably talked about that enough, but these bullets say that this is provided again by the provider, right? We inform that patient about what's going to be happening with them. So these are the components of informed consent. So the patient has a right to know what their problem is. What are you diagnosing me with, and how did you come to that, right? So share the criteria with the patient. I think that's really important. I have pulled out the DSM manual, identified and highlighted criteria, and shared that information, maybe not all at once, because sometimes it can be like, what the heck am I looking at? You know, if they have had no prior background looking at this and they're quite ill, it might be hard to take all of that information in, but if you can get one point across in each engagement with the patient, it's helpful. So what condition do I have? What's the purpose of this treatment? How is it supposed to help me get? So a lot of good nursing education about how this therapeutic intervention is going to be helpful. Then what are the risks and benefits? And are there alternatives to this? Right. Sound reasonable to anybody? And I'll just take a pause right now. Are there questions about what I've said so far? Dr. Belico, have you seen anything in the chat? Gives me a chance to drink too.
Nothing that you haven't covered, Dr. Vic.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, patient confidentiality. So you all have had training recently about HIPAA, I suspect, or at least most of you have before going into clinical, and also about personal health information. And as I shared with you, when you are doing your assignments for this class, your clinical assignments for this class, make sure that you don't have anything that can identify that patient, okay? So like I said, if you feel like you need a name, make up a name and identify to your instructor that this is a pseudonym for the patient that I had, you know, etc. Or you can use, I wouldn't even use the patient's real initials. I would use made up initials and I would identify that as well. Just don't want to have any connections. I don't want to know about the facility that they're in, as I shared with you before. Okay, so confidentiality after death. I will share with you that it has, I worked in a psychiatric institution that had been around since the 1800s, believe it or not. And there were historians that came to our facility to look at the stuff that mental health care from the 1800s to the 1900s, then the 1900s to whatever time period, right? And so we were able to waive confidentiality after death as long as the information from the patients was de-identified, meaning, again, there was no way that you could go back and figure out who that person might have been, okay? And that's the thing with HIPAA information. So when you're providing your assignments to us to read and review, you're de-identifying that patient's information. And so therefore you're good to go with regard to HIPAA and personal health info. Okay. Exceptions to the rule are just what we talked about before, that duty to warn to protect a third party. So if you have a patient that says, I'm going to kill somebody, even if it's a patient in the facility with them, so say they're going to kill another patient that's there, you are responsible for documenting that, talking to the primary care provider about what the patient has said, and protecting that patient from being harmed or killed. Okay. I've had to come between a couple of patients in my work that were one wanted to severely harm the other, and it's heavy, but it's necessary. Also vulnerable adults such as a child, vulnerable adults and children, I should say, and elder abuse reporting statute. So there are things that must be reported. Okay, looking at tort law. There's a section in, I think there's a section in both, yeah, both Halter and ATI have some information about what this is, and this is some important stuff for you. I don't know, do students, I'm gonna ask you a question, Dr. Belico, and students as well. Do you have a class where you have a nurse attorney come in and talk with you about your legal aspects of your nursing practice? Have you had that before? No, okay.
I have not even in my graduate work. I mean, it would be great.
Okay, so I would listen to and study this part for yourself and for your practice, okay? So tort is a civil wrong where a patient can get money, damages from you, so they can literally sue you for something that you have done wrong to them, okay? And that's why I'm not telling you to do this, I'm just putting it out there as an option for you once you graduate. It's important for you to buy your own malpractice insurance, okay? I'm not suggesting any particular one, I'm just suggesting that As you start to buy cars, buy your own home, you don't want to lose all of that because you get sued by a patient and you don't have insurance to cover you. Not that you're ever going to do anything wrong. This may never apply, but you know, I think it's good to be safe. I will share with you personally, I have had it ever since I graduated from nursing school. Okay. But that's something for you to talk over and think over and make decisions about. Okay, looking at intentional tort, this is when you do something willfully or unintentionally. That's almost not the thing that ever happens in nursing, that we actually do something intentional to violate a patient's rights or their property, right? That's stuff that you see in drama on TV, right? So we're not assaulting, meaning threatening people. We're not battering them, meaning punching, hitting, slapping, kicking, whatever, that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, on our first day, we were talking about the potential for violence in the workplace, and someone asked if there was specific types of training for them to receive. If you have the opportunity to receive such training, it's a very helpful thing for you because it helps you to manage your own behavior in times where things get really intense and you feel like you need to self-protect, right? You feel like you need to take physical action in order to protect yourself. There are techniques that can be taught to you where you learn to kind of hands up instead of fist up, right? And turning your body to side so that you don't get hit when somebody comes to grab you. Ways to get people from pulling your hair out and all of these kinds of things. So it's really helpful techniques. And so that you're not reacting to an aggressive act on you. Because even though they're ill and they're striking you, you can still be sued by them because you struck back. Even if you're trying to protect yourself, we're supposed to be trained in order to manage difficult situations like that. Okay. All right. False imprisonment. So that means putting somebody in restraints, like putting somebody in a chair that has a vest and keeps them restrained to the chair, or a table that comes up to them and prevents them from being able to get out of the chair. Putting them in four-sided rails on a bed can be referred to as false imprisonment. If the patient can't get out of that bed, even though, yes, we're trying to keep them safe, it can be looked at in a very negative way, okay? Invasion of privacy, so looking into their belongings or somehow probing into their background and, getting into their business and maybe passing some of that stuff off, all of that stuff, that's all definitely willful and illegal action. And then slandering the patient, saying things about them. We should never, ever be talking about a patient in any environment. You've probably seen those videos of nurses talking in the elevator. Somebody else is in the elevator and they bring up things about a patient that they took care of. They're not saying their name, but the person in the elevator is able to identify who you talked about just by how you described them, okay? And you're saying, libelous or slanderous types of things about them. That's a HIPAA thing, and that's also defamation of character. Then in the unintentional torts, this is the kind of stuff that I think we need to more look out for. They talk about negligence and malpractice. And I think I even have more information about these as we go along. There is a case scenario in Halter where they talk about a duty to report Doreen. So for those of you that have already read that, you know about what's going on with Doreen, right? She comes to work and she's grouchy and not looking too good, doesn't look like she's keeping herself up. She has her little beverage there and she becomes happier throughout the shift as she's drinking her little beverage. Looks like soda, but it's not, right? And then she starts to slur her speech, and as the story goes. Okay, so you can kind of see where this is going to go, right? You must report Doreen. If you do not, you are just as negligible. Okay, so you have to report her. If you have an impaired coworker, you need to go right up the chain of command. Now, if you saw Doreen before she came on shift, if you both came out of the parking lot together and you saw her put her bottle underneath her seat or tuck her liquor in there, you can say something to Doreen directly before she enters the building and tell her she cannot come in and work because you saw her drinking and that you are going to report her. Get some help, do something about this. I'm not going to let this walk in the workplace. Okay? So that you can do. But once she comes in and says she's going to assume patience, you got to report it up the chain. And do some documentation, because you're probably going to have to even possibly go into a hearing type of an environment. Might be work-related or a human resources hearing, but that could definitely happen. Okay, malpractice. Mal means bad. It means you're doing things not according to the norms and accepted standards and practice of nursing. Okay? All right. All right, so I encourage you to look at page 11 in the ATI book, where they talk very specifically and give you quite a bit of information about restraint and seclusion. They actually time it out for you with regard to if you're working with children versus if you're working with adults. And it's summarized, but it is nicely put together so that it's, you know, very clear to understand this. So the time that a person is going to be in restraints is identified by the order of the provider. So let me bring up two things about restraints and seclusion. A nurse can put a person in restraint and seclusion, restraint and or seclusion, based on behavior that the patient demonstrates if they are unable to get this situation under control. But you must get an order from the primary care provider within 15 to 30 minutes of you taking that action. So sometimes restraint and or seclusion is emergency. Nurses have the authority and the ability to do that. You're not ever working by yourself. You pull a team together, you try multiple different types of things to de-escalate. If you're not successful, restrain and seclude. Or seclude. You know, you could just seclude the person and have them one-to-one. You could restrain and seclude. Always, if a person's in restraint, they're secluded, right? You're not going to restrain them in an open public space. All right. But during the time that a person is in restraints, you are responsible to continue to give them care. And I have down every 15 minutes or according to your policy. There's some places where they'll say every 30 minutes. If I have a person in restraints, I release a hand at a time, do massage to that area, talk to them, and the whole time I'm talking to them, my goal is to get them out of restraints as soon as I possibly can. And sometimes I put people in restraints and we've taken them out in 5 minutes. I've also had patients request to be in restraints or to request to be in seclusion. More often you'll hear them say, I need a timeout. I need to go into my room, but we also need to monitor them in that time because they're feeling a lot of pressure, anxiety, and things like that. So we need to make sure that we're monitoring them. Okay, I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Oh, and the different types of restraint, chemical and mechanical. So always try to do chemical, provide a PRN medication first. As a matter of fact, when that person is starting to get amped up or agitated, starting to get verbally loud, go engage that person right away. Don't let it go, because if you don't intervene early, it can escalate into a full-blown full-blown kind of nightmare on the unit for you. You just don't want that. Offer chemical restraint. Offer a PRN sedative type medicine. Okay. Often they're benzodiazepine meds, and they do help patients calm down. Patients will also come to you and say, I'm feeling really agitated. I feel like I want to hurt somebody. I don't want to do that. Do I have a PRN? Sometimes they're benzodiazepines. Sometimes they're neuroleptic or antipsychotic meds that are also used on a PRN basis. Okay. And then the mechanical restraint are those things that we talk, that, you know, I was alluding to before. You can have cloth, you can have leather, you can have upper body restrained, lower body restrained, both. It's typically both, because if they're acting in a way to injure others, they're kicking and all of that stuff, and you don't want that if you can keep from it. Okay, probably enough about this, maybe too much. Then looking at ways that we examine negligence. So negligence is a form of malpractice. Okay. So typically if somebody is trying to prove that you were negligent, they're going to call an expert witness. And that person is a nurse who knows the rules and the regs of the environment that you've been working in. They're an expert in the area. So it would be an expert in psych mental health nursing. So they may have Dr. Belico or myself come and sit in a hearing and give testimony about what a reasonable, prudent nurse would have done in this situation. That's why it's so important that we know what we're supposed to be doing and we do it. Okay. So in this situation about duty, when you come onto your shift and you're assigned patients, you're agreeing to that responsibility. So you have a duty to those patients. Neglecting that duty puts you at risk of being charged with a negligence claim. Breach of duty is when you don't meet the standard. Maybe you don't understand it, but yet you said you're going to take care of this. You're going to address this issue, but you've never done it before. So you might breach your duty because you don't meet the standard of care that's expected. I would always work with someone before I would try to do things that I had no idea what I was doing. Okay. Cause and fact, they're asking, did the act cause the problem? Did the act cause the injury, for instance? So these are examples that I have on the right side of the terms. Okay. Approximate, so we're talking about location, who and what caused the injury. And then damages is what's happened to the individual, and then certainly depending on how significant it is, the damages would influence the amount of money that you would be responsible for paying if you were found guilty. So what we have to help us do our jobs well. You're in nursing school and you're getting an education from a bunch of clinical experts and nurse scientists. And so that's one resource of information, but it's only one. And you really need to be looking at more than that. So I encourage you to, yes, listen to what we share with you and what your clinical instructors share with you so that you can learn what is customary in standards of care, the last bullet point here. And then also look at the institutional policies. Take a minute. If you're involved or see someone that's placed in seclusion, take a look at the policy that applies to putting a patient in seclusion and see how it went. Did they do it just according to Hoyle or according to policy? Pardon me, I should say. Sorry about throwing out little slang things. I do that once in a while. Okay, make sure they're doing it according to policy and procedure. And learn for yourself, right? This is your knowledge that you need as you go forward in practice. And we also have professional organizations that provide us with information. So the American Nurses Association has lots of scopes and standards of practice. And the American Psychiatric Nurses Association has scopes and standards of practice. So those are things that help to keep us in our lane so that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then your Nurse Practice Act and the state board's information. So we have access to that information now more than we ever have. Click of your mouse and you know, you're in business. You've got access to the information that you need to help to ensure that you adhere to the standards of care and that you have no liability because you didn't know these things. Documentation of care. So you know, your documentation is it's a legal document as well as the patient's record. So it's really important that it's fact-based, not what you think, not what someone said, but what you actually saw, what you actually measured. Keep it to the facts. Make sure that it is an accurate representation. Watch what your language is. Recall that last bullet point that I have there. This is the patient's record and they have a right to read it. Yeah, the institution owns the document, but it is about them, so they get to read it. So I want you to be thinking when you're doing documentation that every patient that you take care of has a right to look at what you've written about them. And then when you're writing it, if you're thinking about it from that perspective, I think you're going to make sure that you have just facts, 100% accuracy, right? That you are representing what has happened in that clinical environment, no matter where it is, psych, med surg, OB, peds, etc. Accurate, right? You document what you did and how you did it, what the time of it was, how long it took, what the response of the patient was. All of those things are essential. You probably had this in foundations, right? This information is familiar from that environment, I hope, maybe. We'll see. You got it now. Okay, medical records are also used for quality improvement, okay? So we already talked about the fact that they're evidence, but they're used for quality improvement. They also can be used for research. So people sometimes pull records, get permission to pull records to look at them to see about how many patients were given X and responded with Y. Okay, so you really want to make sure that you develop good expertise in documentation. And I know in a lot of electronic records, it's just kind of click and choose, right? But again, needs to be 100% accurate. Everybody's counting on you to do this well. All right, a little bit about forensic nursing. There was a little video clip, but I wasn't sure how that would translate here, so I didn't put it on here. But for those of you that may have an interest in forensic nursing, this is the aspect of nursing or the discipline, subdiscipline of nursing, where you're bridging the gap between the law and the legal system and the healthcare system, okay? Forensic nurses often provide support to people that have been victims of crimes, like a person who has been raped, like a person who has been physically assaulted. You know, you would learn a special skill set. So they have a very specific type of skill set. Some of these folks are advanced practitioners. They've gone on and got master's or doctoral degrees to develop a set of skills in order to be able to collect evidence that can be used, you know, to resolve criminal behavior. Okay, so very, very interesting aspect of nursing. Had lots of students that have told me in the past that they were interested in that and wanted to pursue this area. And so all you need to do is click into whatever web browser you like and type in forensic nursing, tell me a little bit about it, right? And you can check that out to see what this is all about. So you see my primary bullet points here, but the bottom line is they're there to bridge that gap. They have that wonderful openness for a patient who has been assaulted or hurt in some way, somehow traumatized, and to let that person feel comfortable enough to share what their experience is to the extent that they're able to communicate about that. And then tell them about what next steps are necessary to serve them best going forward. Okay, sometimes these are some very tough things. You think about a person who's been sexually assaulted, male or female, going through having an examination and samples to be obtained and that kind of thing, how tough that would be at the time very close to the traumatic event. I can't imagine how difficult that would be for the patient. So you've got to have that empathetic, caring heart. Okay. All right. So this is a little bit about the psychiatric settings before we go into treatment settings, but the things to consider. So employers are responsible for employee injuries from violent patients. We're looking more and more at information and data that's been gathered about nurses that are injured or assaulted or even shot or strangled, as I shared with you before, by a patient or patient's family when they come in. ED nurses are the most vulnerable to this. I had a student who was a doctoral student that did her doctoral work all about this. She was a nurse manager of an emergency department, and she shared a great deal of detail about what it was like for them to work and how fast the nurses left that work environment. She was hiring nurses constantly. She could not keep them. And she brought armed law enforcement into her ED in order to provide protection for her employees and for the other people that were there receiving care. And she looked at what the effect was on the nurses that were working and what the effect was on, secondary was what was the effect on the people that were there. So it was what was the effect on people working there. And what she found out was that there was an increased sense of safety, but there was an increased sense of worry about the firearm being present. So they liked the fact that the law officer was there. I think that gave them another layer of protection, they felt. I think there was concern about weapons in an ED, which I can kind of understand. So there's a great deal of literature out about that. Okay, nurses must participate in institutional policies that create and maintain a safe environment. And what I want you to be thinking about it when you're in your practice and working is to pay attention to what's going on. And if you see situations or circumstances that give you concern, that you think put you in an unsafe aspect, then think about what can be done to resolve that and work with your institution to help them improve things. It's in everybody's best interest. We talked about documenting the patient and their behavior. And it's important for us to communicate with one another so that we're helping each other, right? We are all working together. It's definitely a community. Okay, we're ready for treatment settings. Take another minute and just ask questions about what we've covered so far.
To me, there's just a conversation about, employees covering the injuries. They're usually covered under workman's comp. There's always places that will try to weasel out of that. So it's where your own documentation comes in case there's any legal ramifications from it.
So the incident report form, that's where I think you need to start, right? So if you have any event that happens on your unit, whether it's to you, to a patient, to a visitor, whatever, you need to make out some type of a report form. incident report might be an old terminology, but I think you get where I'm coming from with that. And you need to, because you have to have a paper trail. You need to document these things. If it's happening to the patient, it's going to be in the patient's record, but you still need to make an incident report if you have an event that occurs where where the patient is hurt. And if it's you that's hurt, you need to document that. You need to create an incident report. So you have a paper trail for workman's comp to look at, for your administration to review. Yes.
The incident, yeah, I agree. The incident report, that's different from what you document in the chart. So, but I would always do the incident report, even if it's something minor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's your backup if you need it. And there's some people asking about the PowerPoints, if you can post updated ones before class.
No, I'm sorry, I can't. I wish I could. I have to be really honest with you. So it's not possible for me to submit them before class because I might be working on them in the last half hour before I get ready. So, or maybe even in the last few minutes, I might want to put a picture in or something like that. So your PowerPoints that you have should have the same information, but not all of the words, right? So I don't necessarily define every term for you in the pre-PowerPoints that you have, because those were put in the platform, what, weeks before we started? Something like that. So we're giving you access to the basics, the structure, the framework of what I'm going to present. But I like to work on these and read through them, almost just like sometimes up to a few minutes before I go on, and I might add something else in there. And so I'm sorry, I can't give you all of the information up front. I don't mean to be rude by saying, no, I can't do that, but you understand now why. So I guess maybe I need to know a little bit more about how you're using the PowerPoint, so I understand why you might want this all up front. Does that make sense to you? So you let me know that. Send me an email and share with me why you feel like it would be best for you to just have everything right in the PowerPoint right then, as opposed to maybe just review the video afterwards, or I could even post these afterwards. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. I don't mean to, make this harder for you. That's not at all what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to make sure that I give you my best thoughts for the content delivered that day. Okay.
Maybe if somebody could hang out after class for a few minutes and we could.
Yeah, that would be helpful. So whoever asks for that, I would love it if you could just hang out with us just for 5 minutes or less. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're in treatment settings. I don't think there'll be a lot of deviation here, but we'll see. So we have treatment settings: outpatient, inpatient, and the different types of outpatient and inpatient. And so that's what this is going to be about. And the people that are providing that care are typically psychiatrists, psychologists, advanced practice nurses, and they have specific roles, right? So the advanced practice people and the primary care provider and the physician, they are able to diagnose and prescribe medications, as we've talked about, provide psychotherapy, talk therapy, lead group therapy, provide individual therapy, and they may also, you may have people that have subspecialties that they focus specifically on people that have like substance use disorder. And so that's their subspecialty. Or perhaps they work more with trauma victims and that's their subspecialty, that kind of thing. So those are types of providers in outpatient psychiatric mental health settings. You also have the patient-centered health and medical homes, and you probably heard about medical homes. And so this is where we're trying to make sure that the care is continuous. So patients that have, particularly patients that have chronic illnesses, need to be able to manage their care in their home. That may involve them having support people that come into the home, or maybe not, but maybe there's communication with those folks. Might involve community health workers that come in, public health nurses that come in and provide a monthly injection or every 3-month injection or something of that nature. But they're coming into the home to provide some of these services. So the medical home is really, it's a wonderful concept, in that we're looking at continuity of care across the lifespan for people typically that have chronic illnesses or need some type of longer term care. We want to make sure that we're providing comprehensive care to patients. And so that's why what we document is so important as well. So we want to make sure that we're really providing what I consider like wraparound. Are we managing the acute exacerbation, thinking about what the chronic condition is, and then thinking about all those parts that help to make sure that the patient's health is addressed. You know, often a patient's health care needs are not this kind of simplistic thing. They sometimes like have a mental health disorder and they have a physical health disorder at the same time. And we've got to make sure that all of that is integrated, and that we're providing the best comprehensive care that we can. We need to be thinking about the holistic care of that patient, looking at the whole person. And the goal for that type of services is to prevent fragmentation. It's very important for people that have multiple healthcare issues to have a case manager, somebody that is managing all the moving parts. Because for people, whether they have a mental illness or not, I've seen this with people that have chronic physical conditions without the mental health component. And sometimes they just have so much going on with them. They can't manage all the moving parts of all the different people that they have to receive care from. Say they have a GI problem like liver disease, and they have a spinal problem. They're in a wheelchair, so they need to see a provider about that. They need to have a physical therapist. They need to be able to get care and get to their appointments and so on and so forth. You need a case manager. And there are case management organizations, sometimes built within health systems, sometimes independent, that can help to provide that service and prevent fragmentation. One of the most wonderful nurses I ever met in my life was a person that was all over that. I marveled at how she would look at what a patient needed and would make sure that she buttoned down every particular thing that they needed and worked with them from their perspective. And I think that's the kind of nurse we all want to be, to make sure that we're really helping to do the best that we can in management, health management for our patients. Community mental health centers. So those are often centers where individuals would be able to go, or clinics, if you will, for outpatient therapeutic interventions. So one-to-one therapy. Or they could also be meeting as a group. So it could be a group of people that are recovering from substance use disorder, and they have a meeting with a health leader, a psychologist, or a counselor or something like that. And they all come and meet at this community mental health center, and they have their therapeutic group or their therapeutic one-to-one. Just depends on what's needed and available. And then psychiatric home care, I think I've already described that to you, so I won't belabor it. Okay, assertive community treatment. So this is an intensive type of case management focused on that chronically mentally ill person who may or may not have issues with adherence to the healthcare plan. I have had patients that went both ways. Sometimes you have patients that are totally willing to work with the healthcare system and follow guidelines, recommendations, and do their best to adhere to the healthcare plan. Sometimes you have people that don't want to do that. They want to be independent. They don't really have, sometimes they don't have insight to the fact that they actually do have a mental health disorder. They think people are just kind of trying to run their lives, and they don't really want that to happen. So, that's an issue. And so you can see the need to prevent return admissions in people that have problems with adherence to treatment plans. So if you stop taking your medicines and you're chronically mentally ill with a disorder that causes you to hallucinate and to act out in ways that could be injurious to self, injurious to others, disruptive to community, that kind of thing, that there would be a need for someone to really help to focus and zero in on what the needs of the individual is. And having good case management services is really helpful there. Know that it goes both ways. I mean, we're all different. So with regard to multidisciplinary teams, you'll also hear people refer to interdisciplinary teams. This is when you have all these different professionals that come together to weigh in on what should be happening, what could be happening with an individual. And a part of that multidisciplinary team really does need to be the patient. We really miss the boat when we think that we can just all make the decisions for that individual without involving them. I've seen it in different care facilities go both ways. It's not that we wouldn't have conversations without a patient. That happens absolutely as members of a healthcare team. But when we're making the decisions about how we move forward, the patient needs to at least be involved at some level and to have voice and weigh in. And nurses really need to make sure that that happens. Okay. So when we do better management, we reduce those inpatient admissions. And you can see case managers visit patients 3 to 5 times a week. And there's overall supervision by the medical doctor, the psychiatrist, or the psych mental health nurse practitioner. Yeah, so probably enough about that. Hope I'm clear. So other types of outpatient programs, so you can have a partial hospitalization program. I have seen that used. I'm sure there are other uses, but I've seen that used, partial hospitalizations, with people that have eating disorders. So as they are in kind of a step down process, so maybe they've been inpatient in the hospital for a period of time and they've been on this plan, they're starting to gradually gain weight. I'm thinking about somebody with anorexia nervosa, came in 70 pounds, say, 5'5", 5'6", tall person, about 75 pounds, binging and purging. So they're taking laxatives, they're making themselves vomit, this kind of stuff. They come in, they go through the inpatient program, and then they go to a partial hospitalization program. And that means that they're in the hospital, say for the time that they're eating meals, and for a period of time post the meals, so that they can be monitored and to support their behaviors, their healthy behaviors of keeping that food in their bodies until it has time to digest. And then still monitoring them for weight gain and so on and so forth. So that's an example of a partial hospitalization type of thing. Other outpatient venues for psych care, one of the most common that probably most of you are aware of is a crisis hotline. Those are very helpful, especially after hours. I think you all should have access to your local hotline for suicide, for any psychiatric concern that a person might have. Should have that somewhere in your cell phone already. Just hit the button or post it someplace in your room somewhere, because the time that you need to address a crisis is usually immediate. And we don't want to take a lot of time trying to find where this information is. Although some of you are probably so quick with your phones, you just get it zip, just like that. But, you may have a student that you come into contact with, or a friend, or, just a peer that becomes suicidal. And we need to reach out and get them some help in a hurry. And doggone it, I don't know why, but people become suicidal after 6 o'clock. So you got to do the hotline because you can't, or unless you can get them to the hospital, right? Get them to an emergency room. But that hotline is very helpful. Okay. There are also groups that get together on Facebook, lots of different social media things where people have a specific type of mental health concern, and they all come together and have chat sessions or text sessions or things of that nature. And so that's kind of our current media situation has really changed our lives. And then telepsychiatry and telemedicine. Some people are doing that in practice at the college right now. College of Nursing has telemedicine ability and are training nurses in that capacity. Dr. Balico, you want to share anything about telemedicine with the students?
Well, just that it's becoming way more prevalent these days. People were kind of hesitant about it. And then as with COVID, things that were not offered virtually started to be offered online as well. The physical health care, and there's a whole lot. There's almost everything you can be done that way. And so what we're finding even through the university is that, for example, students who start using telehealth for counseling services really like it, and even when they've returned, they prefer to do it that way.
Cool.
So, it's convenient.
It is convenient. I know I'm running out of time, right? How much time do I have?
Like not any.
Like no time? Okay. All right. So I'm going to see how many more slides I have. Okay. I will bring this back. So when we come back, I'll start on primary goals, so on and so forth. So I would just ask the person that asked me about these slides to stay on with us, or if there's multiple people, that would be wonderful. Otherwise, it's been great this week, great today to be speaking with you and sharing this information. Please do let us know if you have any questions about what we're communicating with you and sharing with you. It's important that we address any of your learning needs that we possibly can. So email us, call me. You have my cell number, text me. I'm good with texting. So that's probably it. Okay, so I see some people still here. Good, good, good. Okay, so unmute yourself and tell me what's going on. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Y'all can unmute too.
Everybody unmute.
Hello.
Hi.
Here, I'll turn on my video too.
I'm gonna try to.
Some people don't have a mic hooked up, just so that's.
What's that?
I was just saying some people don't have a mic hooked up. So if there's anything you want me to relay, go ahead and type it. I'll still watch the chat.
Good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just think it's easier for us to follow along if we have the same information in front of us. Like I feel like I don't really bother to look in the other PowerPoint because that's not what you're going off of. So it's just a little confusing to, I don't know. It's just easier for us, I feel like, to have it first.
Okay, so let me share this with you. So it's the same slides. I just add more information. And so they might look different, but I don't think I changed any of the slides today at all. I think except for I added something more to them. I think they're the same slides. So I know they look different, but it's really essentially the same information.
Okay.
But so it's difficult for you to go along with what I'm sharing with you as I'm communicating it in this chat or in this media. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. It's just, oh yeah, someone said there's information on the new PowerPoint that isn't on the old ones. So we have to rush to write down everything that isn't on the old ones. that's not on the,
Okay, but you really don't have to, because remember, I'm going to share this with you after we finish. Does that help, that knowing that you'll have it? But so then I guess it maybe the question is, why do we give you these preliminary PowerPoints if they, and we give you those just to kind of use as a tool to help you when you're doing the reading before the class. So does that make sense? So use those in the way for preparation, but know that at the time after this class is over, I'll upload this so that you have it, and I'll call it lecture 3. And I'll just number these lectures as I go along. So you'll have this, just what I've shared with you. And then you also have the recording. So,
okay.
So use the other one just kind of like, as you're going through the book and you want to look at a PowerPoint while you're going through the book, you can use that way. That's just preparation stuff. That's what I would think of that as. Does that help?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat.
No, it's
Yeah.
okay. That's good.
I just agree with the other people writing in the chat saying, like, sometimes I print out the PowerPoint before it's posted, and then I can like write down additional notes that you might say.
That's a good thing too, because they say that if you're writing down notes, that you come closer to retaining that information than just reading it.
Right. But it's just more difficult to be writing it down when we don't have the same exact PowerPoint while we're listening to write it down, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. So I guess if there's a difference in the slide, then maybe just wait, because you know it's going to be the very next slide, right? So if you notice that, that's what I would suggest. But I just, this time I try to make a conscious effort not to change the order of any of the slides, but just to kind of put them there and then add more information that I thought, I can define this term so that they can see it, instead of just saying it and then you don't have it to read, that kind of thing. So like in the autonomy, beneficence, that slide, I decided to put the information in there. So, yeah. Okay. Other questions? Anybody?
I think people are saying some stuff in the chat box.
I'm sorry, I was muted. The 6 slides in the treatment settings, going back, those are adding, I'm going to add them in.
6 slides in the treatment settings.
There was first 6 slides were different. I don't have the PowerPoint right with me. So
it's okay. If they're saying it's different, maybe it is. I don't, I've probably done these lectures so many times, I might have multiples and I might have pulled a wrong one. So I can look at them and compare them, but the information should be pretty close. I don't think there should be big deviations. And again, I think of the slides that you have in Blackboard as slides used to prep yourself for what we're going to discuss. And I'm certainly willing to share them in total. And if you're, like you, the young woman said earlier, she's using them to do notes on. So maybe you'll have a slide that is somewhat different. Write a note off on the side and say, different slide or something like that, but just write down anything that you think is absolutely germane. I think I have most of the major content in the PowerPoints themselves that are posted.
I mean, is there anything I can do to help with this? You want, I ask about notes pages. I don't know if that's any easier, but even if it's not the same. Salkehatchie has a specific print day. I didn't know that.
I mean, I do think I don't know. I do think that it would be easier for all of us if just like the same, I know that you don't want to do that, and I like totally understand, but just from like the comments and what everyone has been saying, it is easier for all of us if we are following along with the same PowerPoint. But then again, like you said, we can always just go back. It takes a little bit more time and energy.
Well, it sounds like you have to do more note taking, right? Is that what's happening? Because
Right, and it's a little confusing, like going off of two different, I know it's the same information, but it's just easier to remember if we're looking at the same stuff over and over again, not different PowerPoints.
I'm wondering if we have, this case, they're usually not that different. So I'm wondering if this case we just, I went through and was deleting old stuff. I may have deleted the wrong thing, and there's maybe left the old one. Dr. Vic, I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I'll double check that.
Even last class, I remember there was in the beginning of the lecture, everybody was like, which PowerPoint are you going off of? They were tossing the comment. Nobody was really understanding where we were. And so I think that's a perfect example of the confusion that can happen from the difference in the PowerPoints. And so we've all gotten into the habit with all of our courses of printing off the PowerPoint ahead of time so that we have that in front of us to both follow along with you, but also to be able to write on. And so kind of what Mel was saying about like how it can be confusing. In my opinion, it's honestly a little bit distracting to have to write down these extra things that you're saying or like write down the extra things that are on your new PowerPoints, and then maybe we're missing what you're actually talking about because we're so focused on writing what's on the PowerPoints. And realistically, no one's going to both print the ones from beforehand and then also the ones from after.
I wouldn't. No, I would.
It's become this problem of writing and listening to you at the same time. Just can be a little distracting and hard to follow along.
Okay.
The culture PowerPoint you're talking about?
I'm
looking at the
I
chat.
can't remember whichever the first one was from last there were 3 from last lecture.
On Monday.
The culture one.
So we did therapeutic communication, therapeutic relationships, and culture. Culture was first. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was quite a bit changed. There's no question that was quite a bit changed because
Right.
there was a lack of important information in the original one. So definitely that was changed. So it's just people have different ways of learning. I really appreciate hearing what you're saying. So I guess I can just go forward now. So here's something I want you to respond about. If I use the PowerPoints that are in Blackboard, they don't have all of the detail. That okay with you? And you'll just write it in if I just use what's there, what you have access to? It's okay to write more as long as the slides are just the absolute same as I go through it, correct?
Yes, because then we can also understand which points of that you would rather us emphasize, and like then when you are elaborating on that extra information you maybe would have put in, then we can get a better understanding of what the key points are for each slide.
Okay, so I will not from now on, because I want, and we'll just try it out. We can modify again if we need to. So I will just use the PowerPoints that are in Blackboard going forward. And it may mean that you need to do a little bit more writing as we go along, but we'll stay in step with what's there. If that makes it easier and better for you, then great. And the other thing is all of the extra stuff that I say to you, you can pick up in the video, correct? Yes? Okay, now I see where you're coming from. And yes, instead of no. Yes, I will just follow the PowerPoints that are posted. I'll take a look at them and I'll just say, okay, this is where we're at. And I'm good with that. And then if you all decide, oh, this isn't just exactly what I wanted, then we can talk about modifying it again. It's important to me that you get this because you'll use all of this information. It's important.
Thank you very much.
I am so pleased to do it. I just needed to understand where you were coming from and what was going on. Okay. All right. Other questions, concerns, thoughts? I'm sorry I've kept you so long. Dr.
And
Boo-
you don't know what you're going to be tested on. You're going to know some things that you aren't going to be tested on too, but definitely that's where Dr. Vick's points of enlightenment, famous points of enlightenment, will come in handy.
Yeah, I will
Before
definitely make sure you have those.
I just want to say one other thing. And I was putting this in the chat too, but in case you weren't reading the chat, the first couple of weeks of this class in particular, and maybe your others, there's a whole lot of background foundational things, and it seems like you're kind of just jumping from topic to topic, and some things that you've heard about before, some things that are new, and it just isn't the same after the first 2 weeks. It's a lot more reading at the beginning, and just kind of get the foundation for everything that we're going to be doing from here on out. When we start in with the mood disorders and things, and the different categories of disorders and the treatment and the medications that go along with that, it will seem a lot more intuitive, I think, and easier to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So if something is a little different, it won't throw you off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know it does. You're right. Thank you for saying that, Dr. Belico, because it does seem like I'm going from one thing to another, and how are these things connected?
I mean, we go over it because these are things that are on boards, and they're things that are in your ATI and all, but it's not possible to cover everything, even within just one semester. It's kind of a setup, and we do want to touch on the things that are the most important, but the only way to do that is to kind of cram everything all the background things the first couple of weeks.
Thank you all for staying.
Don't get discouraged.
No, don't. Oh, absolutely don't get discouraged. We're just getting started. It's going to be, to me, this is fun. I'm sorry that it's been a burden for you. That was not my intention. I love this content, and I am so happy to be sharing this information with you. It's really important that it's in a way that works well for you. So I'm very pleased that you stayed and chatted with us about this.
Is there any way you can like modify the ones to put all the information that you want and then just post those before class, so we're all going off the updated one?
I will post this. Is that what you're asking me?
No, like before class and modify the PowerPoint so they have more information. Is there any way that you can just post those before class so we can print those out and we all have the same updated information?
When do you access the PowerPoint? So some people are printing them off. Are you doing it the day before?
No, well, I was, because I thought they were going to be the same, but since they're not, now I'm trying to wait till the day of to print, because I want to have the same thing that you're teaching off of that we can follow along. So can we just have that posted before, like the updated one, and then you teach off the updated one and we have the updated one so it all has the same information?
Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the concern with that. So when I'm talking with you, do you notice that not everything I'm talking about is not on those slides? So I guess I would encourage you I can go in and try to make some modifications to some of them ahead of time. Absolutely, I can try to do that. Like I can look at them over the weekend and see how many I think, oh, they really should have this, I can add that on. So don't do anything before Sunday night, I guess I would say. Don't print off for Monday until Sunday night. But I am a person that tries to talk about lived experience, and I don't think I could put everything on this presentation for you that I'm going to communicate is what I'm trying to share.
No, I know that. I just mean like today, the new one that you had, it's not the bare one that's on Blackboard, and you said you're going to post it after class.
Right.
Instead of posting it after class, can you post it before class starts so we can print that and have that as our guide? Sure.
Yes.
We'll have the updated information, and then
it might be pretty close to the time class is starting, like within the hour. But yeah,
Well, that's okay because we can even pull it up and type from our computer if need be. Like if we can't print
Yeah, on
right
the
then.
PowerPoint.
That's right, you can edit your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Hachi on Monday, just FYI.
say that again.
It's Takahashi, they're just letting you know that they print on Monday. They have a campus they can go, and that's when they can print there.
Okay.
But I guess if we could, if you want to pop it to me or something before, well, the class, if you don't want to go, if you're not going into Blackboard, I could maybe post it while you're getting ready. They could.
We'll do our best to make it as accessible as we can. That's all I can.
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Yes.
And they could actually, y'all can go in and edit the PowerPoint, right? Right into the PowerPoint.
I don't know. Can you work on your PowerPoint while you're looking at this?
Yeah, you can edit the PowerPoint. That's why it would be like most beneficial if we could all just go off the same PowerPoint, because then we can write notes.
Okay.
They can type notes right into it.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So the main thing for me at this point now is to use what's on there. That's what we're using. Everybody's going to have the same one.
Yes.
Yes, you might have to type a little bit more. And for the person that asked me to put some more stuff on there, I'll try to do that and put it right back into Blackboard as I do it. But I don't know. It'll
So,
be, I'll do
why
why
don't we work on just the slides? So, every speck of content on the slides maybe won't be exactly the same, and you'll have to edit that. But yeah.
Yes.
So not that if we add slides in or something, then try to get those in.
I'm not going to add any slides. We won't add slides, but we might add content right on the slides. So
as long as it's the same slide with the same heading.
Yeah, we're not going to deviate to make it easier for everybody.
So are you gonna by yourself before, like the night before, are you still gonna update the PowerPoint by yourself and then read off of that one, and then post that one before the class, or are you going off the ones that are already on Blackboard?
Okay, so I am going to download the PowerPoints from Blackboard, look them over, and if I think I want to change it and I have time, I will change it and put it right back in there. And if I don't have time, then I'm going to talk with you in class about a topic and you can modify in your PowerPoint. Does that sound fair?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my goal is to provide you with as much information that you have access to beforehand, because that's what I'm hearing from everybody that they want. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'm such an ad-libber, it's hard, right?